Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This week we're going to be diving into the world of budgeting. So buckle up, get ready, because here we go. First of all, let's talk a little bit about why we budget. There are a ton of reasons for budgeting, but one of the most prominent ones is so that we'll have enough money for the things we need to do, and then maybe even have a little bit left over for the fun wants of life. So first of all, I'm going to paint you a picture of how I like to look at budgeting. So imagine there's a giant mountain right in front of you and your goal is to climb over it. Just looking up at that mountain from the ground might make that climb seem impossible. But cutting that mountain into little chunks and just looking a few miles up at a time will make it much more manageable and easier to imagine yourself climbing. So each time you hit one of these 2 or 3 mile checkpoints on the mountain, just start creating your next one. And before you know it, you'll be like halfway up the mountain, and then next time you check, you'll be at the peak. Now let's imagine this scenario in terms of budgeting. Maybe you're saving up for something pretty big like a laptop. That expensive price tag might seem impossible to save up for at first, but when you break it up into smaller increments, it just seems easier and easier. For example, let's say I want to save up for an iPad. The base model of an iPad comes in at $329. That seems like a lot at first, but what I'm going to do in this example is split it up into smaller chunks of $50. I get my paycheck every 2 weeks, so every 2 weeks I'm going to take $50 out of my paycheck and set that aside toward my iPad fund. I'm going to make sure not to spend this money, but every 2 weeks I am going to add $50 to it. These smaller chunks come out of my paycheck every 2 weeks, but in the background they start to add up. And in less than 3.5 months, I will have saved up enough money to buy my iPad. This strategy can really be applied to anything, whether it's a phone or a car or a house one day. So imagine you're wanting to buy a $10,000 car. Another strategy that can work is setting up a time limit for when you want to make this purchase by. Setting that limit might make you feel more motivated to save more effectively. So say I want to buy this car in 2 years. With that time limit in mind, I can do a little bit of math and figure out how much money I need to take out of each paycheck to be able to pay for that car in 2 years. Budgeting like this has a ton of benefits and can lead to overall greater financial stability and a better understanding of how long it will take to budget a certain amount of money based on your income and your budgeting plan. It can also help people get out of debt little by little if that's something you're needing to do. Another thing that can help with budgeting is using budgeting apps. These can help you be more aware of your spending and can help you budget for things and save money. Personally, I use Rocket Money, which has a free version that connects directly to your bank. I'm able to set up budgeting categories that allow me to set aside what amount of money I'm going to spend on each thing for the month. And the app does all the work of tracking how much I spend and categorizing my purchases and telling me how much I have left to spend in each category for the month. I make these categories using the bucket system or the envelope system. There's a lot of different names for it. And then I create a monthly spending limit for each bucket. How this works is you split up everything you want to spend money on into different categories, which are called the buckets. And these can be things like shopping, car payments, food, stuff like that. And then just make sure to spend within your limits each month. Obviously though, the most important thing is to make sure you're setting aside enough money to put into your savings, car insurance, phone payments, and stuff like that first, before you're setting aside money for your fun things like shopping and going out with friends. But softwares like Rocket Money make budgeting super easy because I'm able to split my spending into different allowances and then I can basically spend without even thinking about it and without going over any limits. Of course, there's a little bit of thinking involved when you're creating your budgets, and that can be pretty tricky, but imagine your paycheck as a pie. Your budget pie is only so big, so you can't add to one category without taking from another. This is really important to remember because while a little extra shopping here and there might seem harmless, that extra money is being pulled from places that it probably shouldn't be pulled from, like savings or insurance payments, for example. But more than this, it's really important to budget for an emergency fund. If something happens like a car wreck or your phone shatters, it's important to have an emergency fund so that you can replace these things and continue life as normal without having any huge setbacks. These things can happen at any moment, and it's important to remember that these payments cannot be avoided. If you don't have an emergency fund, the money to pay for these things will always have to come out of your fund money since you can't really pull from your necessity money like insurance and stuff. If you want to decrease the effects that these possible emergencies will have on your spending habits, creating an emergency fund with enough money to cover at least some of the damage will be super beneficial. So I don't have to worry about things like paying rent yet, but it is important to look toward the future and think about what expenses there are going to be. Rent, insurance, gas, groceries. These are all things that we're going to need to budget for sometime in the future, so it's really important to build a strong budgeting foundation now so that we're ready when the time comes. So I'm going to go over some budgeting tips really quickly that might be useful in the future and are good to kind of think about now. So Stephanie Genkin is a certified financial planner, and she uses the 50-30-20 budgeting plan. This means setting aside 50% of your paycheck for things like rent, utilities, and groceries, setting aside 30% of your paycheck for leisure spending, and setting aside 20% of your paycheck for savings. A general rule of thumb is to not set aside any more than 30% of your paycheck for housing, but that's often a very difficult figure to achieve since housing is so expensive. Finally, most people say that you should be saving around 20 to 30% of your paycheck for retirement, which is a really good thing to go by, but again, that can be pretty difficult when all the other necessary payments come into the picture. But those are just some super quick tips for the future, and maybe I'll make a more in-depth video if you guys want to. Let me know down below. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next week where we're going to be talking about investing. So goodbye, have a fantastic day, and go get that bread.